What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Monday edition of Morning Cup of Hockey. Hope you all had a great weekend. I'm still recovering a little bit from my weekend, which I'm sure Colby will make fun of me for in a bit. But this is Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code NATION, N-A-T-I-O-N, in all caps. Colby, how you feeling? Because we haven't heard from you in a while. You missed Thursday's show, the first show you've ever missed in the history of this show. And I will say, we did miss you, but it was nice to have Jeff Merrick step in and get the call up for the day. But how you feeling? Everything good?
Everything is good, except for, as you can all see, not in my normal situation here at my house. The power actually went out this morning. So why, I don't know. Pico Energy sent us a message and said there's power outages in your area. But I've got the hotspot going on the cell phone. So we're good. Appreciate Jeff stepping in. But let's get to our first guest here because he doesn't have a lot of time. And I know it's a topic that we wanted to dive into because it's something that we've covered pretty closely on the show, meaning let's call it the beginning parts of this whole saga. And I think it will probably be ongoing. I don't think this is something that will maybe ever go away for this guy's career. So, Johnny, I don't know if you want to read him in or if you have to read him in, but I'll let you get to that and then we'll bring him right on.
So we've got Kevin Kurz from The Athletic joining us, who covers the Philadelphia Flyers. And before we bring him on, just want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. And Kevin, let's just get right to it. John Tortorella called it bullshit. I don't buy it. I think the Flyers loved every second of it. What did you make of that win on Saturday night with Cutter Gauthier coming to Wells Fargo for the first time?
Yeah, John Tortorella and Cutter Gauthier both want to make it out like the media created this whole thing, that's the bullshit part to me. If we're gonna use that word. When Cutter was traded in January, the Flyers very quickly got out in front of it. We had, you saw Keith Jones on the game broadcast. Dan Hilferty, the CEO, went on an in-house podcast, and I don't think that was the wrong move. I think that's something they wanted to get ahead of because, frankly, as you guys know, Cutter Gauthier was supposed to be part of the rebuild here. He was supposed to be a big piece of the future, and he essentially cut off all communication with the team. So, this was not a media-driven narrative. This was something that happened organically, and the fact that I spoke with Cutter on Thursday, the day before the game. I guess that was Friday. He repeats that, but then when I ask him to clarify what it is he's upset about or what he perceives to be lies, he doesn't want to get into it. So, we're left with more questions than answers in that regard. And the crowd was great on Saturday. I don't think there's any other way to put it. They didn't do anything stupid. They stayed within the lines. They did not let up for the entire game. This guy was jumping on the ice in the middle of the third period of a 6-0 game. They were still booing the crap out of him. So it was definitely a memorable game on Saturday.
Well, look, I think that's what makes Philly sports fans. That's what makes them great. I think when you look at, there's a lot of really great fan bases in sports, and I know every player says we have the best fans in the world, and I do actually believe there's a lot of different fan bases that have their own sort of trademark on things. And look, you and I grew up in this market, Kevin. Like, this is the market that threw things at Santa Claus. Like, that's Philly sports. And honestly, I loved it. I loved every second of it. I loved what the fans did. I loved how they showed up. Tortorella trying to put water on it felt a little like, I'm trying to be the principal. Yeah. I'm trying to be the principal in high school here at Radnor High School type of thing. I don't know. Like, there's a way you can stay out of that lane without having to be such a wet noodle about it. But I think the thing for me that I was the most disappointed about, and I'll just set the record straight here. I never had an issue with what Cutter Gauthier did. I had an issue with how he did it, just to refresh everybody. I have no issue with a player not wanting to play somewhere and using whatever leverage they have to do it. It's how he went about it and continues to go about it, which is what I don't agree with, and that's okay. But he didn't play the villain, and he could have played the villain. And I felt like he just put his tail between his legs and he curled up into his shell, and he didn't relish it. And I don't know if you took it any differently, and I know you got a chance to speak to him directly, but I thought that would have been a good opportunity for him to almost plant a flag a little bit and relish being the villain.
Yeah, there wasn't any pushback at all. And it seemed to me, in the first period, we didn't really notice him at all. The second period, it almost seemed to me like some of the players wanted to give the fans what they came for. And we saw him get, Rasmus Ristolainen leveled him a couple times. Here you see Konecny basically challenging to a fight, and we in the game in Anaheim on the very first shift, Travis Sanheim gave him a couple cross checks to the midsection there, and I don't think the cameras caught it, but he spoke afterwards how there was maybe a little message sending going on. I think guys like Sanheim and Konecny, especially, they almost take it a little personally, right? That a guy is bad mouthing the organization or insinuating some things about the organization. Whereas these guys consider themselves lifetime Flyers, or they're probably going to spend all of, if not the majority of their careers in Philadelphia. And that was the interesting part to me, is that I do think there was a little bit of they knew who was wearing number 61 out there, and they wanted to lay the body on him as much as they could. So that sort of fed into, I think, the atmosphere in the building when he started to become a target a little bit. And obviously they all denied it after the game, right? I asked Konecny directly. It looked like cameras caught you challenging Cutter to a fight. He's like, no, I didn't challenge him to a fight. So they didn't want to talk about it. They want to move past it. And obviously it's over with now. But, the main thing they can take from that game is that the atmosphere in the building was a playoff-like atmosphere. And a lot of them haven't played. And I remember it. You remember it, Colby. I hadn't heard the building that loud in a long time. This is only my second year back here, but I think anyone who goes on a regular basis would say that building hasn't been that jacked up in a long, long time.
Well, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier too, about how this wasn't a media-driven story, and how the Flyers kind of came out and got ahead of it. But now that you said also, Kevin, it's over and done with. Is it? I know these teams only play twice a year. They're in Philly once a year. Does the questions now for Cutter, or do the questions for Cutter kind of stop now that he made or played in this game in Philly? Does this story end, or will it continue to happen? And again, I know the media will have to ask questions, right? Next time Cutter is in Philadelphia, you'll have to ask, now that you have this game under your belt, do you feel more comfortable coming into this building? And that's probably going to be the narrative next time. But again, these stories almost tell themselves as opposed to the media driving them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to ask him anymore whether or not he wants to clarify what went wrong in Philadelphia. I think we just have to move forward at this point. I mean, he's going to get booed here.
Forever.
That won't stop ever. Yeah.
There's no question about that. I don't think it's probably going to be, Sidney Crosby's gets booed here 20 years after he was drafted. So I don't think that's going to change. But I think for everybody involved, at least on the ice, it's going to be a non-issue moving forward. He'll take his booze, and they'll maybe die down a little bit next time. But I think it's over and done with. And the question for the Flyers now is, what can they do with Jamie Drysdale? Because that's the main piece they got back. He's been up and down a little bit. Had a great game on Saturday. We'll see if that sparks him. But the Flyers are still waiting for Drysdale to put it all together, and that's a big question right now. Is the blue line is getting more crowded for this team when it comes to young and smallish defensemen as well. Is he going to be able to guy that can separate himself from the rest of the competition internally now and become a key piece of the future? And that's very much a question still.
When's the last time we saw a Stanley Cup winner with a bunch of defensemen under 6 feet? I mean, you don't see that anymore. You look at Vegas, you look at Florida, you look at, even Edmonton, who got there last year, big men who can skate. I mean, there's always room for one, maybe two, but you need big horses back there that can get through the brutal, the brutal part of the playoffs. And I hear Ristolainen's name, coming up on, every show in Philadelphia, and they're constantly talking about the value that he has. What do you think the future is? And is he a guy that they move off of? We've seen Danny be stubborn, didn't want to move off of Scott Lawton last year. And I've seen people that love that move. I've seen people be critical of that move, but I guess so. It's a two-parter for you, and I know you don't have a lot of time, but what is the plan for the trade deadline? And then bigger picture, right? I have a hard time seeing the plan here. Like, they're going to finish out of the playoffs again this year, but they're not going to be in the lottery. Too good, but not good enough almost, or what? So I know that's a long-winded ask of you, and it's a two-parter, but these are things that I wonder, because I live here and people ask me, and I don't know the answer.
Well, when it comes to the trade deadline, I would be shocked if the Flyers don't move Rasmus Ristolainen. He's playing very well. I think they could find a team that could potentially take on his whole salary. I think it's $5.1 million for a couple of years after this. And as you said, Colby, he's a big guy. He can skate. I mean, you go back to the 2 games the Flyers played against the Maple Leafs last week. I think he was their best player. If you take both those 2 games as a whole, he was everywhere. He's getting power play time now. I think he's a guy that they, because of his salary and because of what they could potentially get back for him, they're going to move him. I would be very surprised if they moved him. Scott Lawton is another one where I don't think they're going to move him. I don't think they want to. I think they still look at him as sort of the emotional heartbeat of this team, the dressing room leader. I think you take a big chance when you move guys like that. He's been versatile this year. He's played the wing. He can play center. He's their best penalty killing forward. And I think, especially with Matvei Michkov here, they're really putting a premium on keeping that culture that they reestablished intact. And I know that's a big topic that some Flyers fans don't like to hear about that. They think it's all BS. I'm someone who believes in that, just because in San Jose in particular, I saw Joe Pavelski leave that dressing room, and they bring in Evander Kane and Erik Karlsson, and everything went to hell. So I'm a big believer in keeping there are certain guys in certain dressing rooms that I think you want to keep around for the long haul to keep everything sort of kosher behind closed doors. I think Scott Lawton's that guy. And basically I've been told also that they really do not want to trade him. Now, if some the what might change their minds is if they see a top line center out there and a team is insisting on Scott Lawton for this potential top line center. Well, that's different. All cards are off the table. I think all bets are off the table at that point if it's for a top line center. But they're not going to let Scott Lawton go for a pair of 2nd round picks, and I think they'd even be reluctant to let him go for a late 1st round pick.
They wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. They had that last year. They had a 1st round pick on the table for Lawton last year, and they wanted more than a 1st round pick. They wanted 2 1st round picks for him.
Yeah, they want to keep him. That's the bottom line. They don't want Scott Lawton to go anywhere. So, that's but at the same time, it's Danny's in a year and a half in here, and we saw the Gauthier trade. He kind of had his hand forced on that one. I think everyone around here is waiting for that big move, where he really takes a chance on whether it's a Dylan Cousins or even an Elias Pettersson. Everyone's waiting around to see what he does to make that first.
I wouldn't put Cousins in that. Just I'm hearing myself say, but you mean go get a superstar player.
Yeah, or someone that at least has that potential. I mean, they need a center right now, right? And you've got Michkov here, and I would think that moves the timeline up to try to get a center to play with this guy, because he's been bounced all around the lineup. They don't have a guy that has meshed with him. Couturier's. I think Tortorella's a little concerned with his pace. Morgan Frost is up and down. Noah Cates has been very good, but he's more of a 3rd line center. I think on a good
Noah Cates. You can't expect him to produce with Michkov. Yeah.
No. So you're really looking for a center that's maybe not a number 1, but at least a top 2 center. for a little while. I think that you can plug with Michkov. So, where they're at, Danny's going to be patient, though. I think that's an attribute of his, a positive one, is he's going to be patient. They're going to wait this out. It might not happen before this year's trade deadline. It might not even happen next summer. They've been very clear that their window, basically, this is the second year of a 3-year window where their primary concern is getting money off the books and keeping the culture intact and growing their young players. And that takes time. And they're in the second year of this third year, I would say.
So, Kevin, I know you do have to go here. A lot of people in the chat right now are asking about the new arena that the Flyers are getting. That's not how I understand it, by the way.
No, that's not it.
Yeah, that's definitely not it. And so maybe you can provide a little clarity on this arena situation, because my understanding is far from that the Flyers are getting a new arena.
No, the Sixers were supposed to get one in downtown, and that got nixed yesterday. So essentially the Sixers are staying at Wells Fargo Center.
Well, but I thought they're announcing a new arena just for the WNBA team. Or, excuse me, just for the NBA. They're partnering with Comcast and building a new arena in the parking lots down there, and that's just going to be for the Sixers. No?
Well, unless I missed the news this morning, that's not. No, I don't think that's what it is. No, the Sixers are staying at Wells Fargo Center, and what they're going to try to do, at least from what I read, is that they're going to try to build up that area with hotels and restaurants and stuff.
Got it. Okay.
Well, Frank tweeted something just now. So if you want more information,
then maybe that's true. That's a Sixers thing. I haven't really paid attention to that, to be honest.
Too, yeah. But the way I read it, though, just so you know, was that they're going to build an arena, but it's going to be only for the NBA team, and they're going to get a WNBA team, and now we're going to have 4 arenas down there, not 3. And they're partnering 50-50 with Comcast for the Sixers' new arena, like Lincoln Financial.
I just saw Frank's tweet, so that's news to me. Yeah.
Kevin, do you have time for one more?
No, go ahead, guys. Yep.
I just have to ask this question because I spent the entire weekend with a friend of mine who's a diehard Flyers fan, and he was trying to convince me that Travis Konecny is a top 20 player in the NHL. And I know he's 13th in scoring right now, but you watch him every single night, and I'm curious where you'd rank Travis Konecny amongst players in the league.
Yeah, I don't know about top 20. That might be a little ambitious, but I would put him in the top 20 forwards probably, at least on the cusp of that. This guy every night brings it. He's a guy that he signs his 8-year contract extension in the offseason. Hasn't slowed down at all. He's having a career year. So I think that should tell you a lot about his character and his drive, and frankly, why the Flyers wanted him to be around for the long term, because they look at him as, again, I talk about culture, but he's a guy, he gets his bag and he's still playing his butt off. So
he is the Flyers right now. I think Flyers. I think of Travis Konecny.
Yeah, and you go back to what happened there with Cutter Gauthier and him basically challenging to a fight, because I think he takes it personally when someone is critical of the organization that he's so committed to. And yeah, he's a guy that he's not slowing down at all. He's in the prime of his career. I think he's still going to be an effective player when this team wants to compete again. And I have no issues whatsoever with that contract extension, because he's a guy that. You said it, Johnny. He's what represents this team right now. He represents this team right now in so many ways.
And you need pieces. Like, you do need pieces to build around. And is Konecny going to be? I've said this even about Michkov. I don't believe Michkov is your linchpin piece for the entire rebuild or retool. I think he's a really nice piece, a part of it. But I don't think until you get that superstar franchise centerman or that defenseman that's one of those great few that there's only a few that even exist, I still think those guys are all pieces, but they are not necessarily the piece, at least from my eyes.
Just one more thing on Konecny, though, or you can go, Kevin. Sorry.
Until they find a center or two, I think that's fair. I might be a little higher on Michkov than you are. I think he's still learning his way through here, and we've seen times where he's basically admitted that he's not. He physically, it's really wearing on him. The grind of the season is really wearing on him.
You'd expect it.
Yeah, and John Tortorella mentioned that they want to make sure that he trains the right way this offseason, eats the right way. Probably things that he's never really thought about or had enough guidance for. So, I think he's got a ridiculous skill set. His competition level is off the charts. I mean, this guy, I do think he's the real deal, and he's going to be fun to watch for a long time.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I do think top of the circle's blue line in. I mean, he has an elite level skill set, no doubt. I just worry I just don't know because of his skating if the rest of his game is going to ever really have a chance to be dominant. Yeah. So I've been more just having fun with Flyers fans about the whole debate of who's going to win Calder this year. But I do think Michkov has a crazy high ceiling with a lot of talent. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind about that. I know it's a struggle for him right now, but every guy hits a wall in their first year. Every single player without exceptions.
And just the last thing I wanted to add on Konecny, I don't know if you've talked to him about Four Nations, but I know he's played, World Juniors and stuff like that, but I imagine, the pride he has to play Four Nations for Team Canada. Is that something that you think would put a player like him more on the map nationally or internationally as far as like his popularity goes? Because, people who watch the Flyers understand what kind of player he is, but I still don't think Konecny is one of those guys that everyone around the league talks about when it comes to hockey fans.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, he's a guy that they're probably going to use him on the penalty kill, I would think, at the Four Nations. And that's probably a big part of the reason he made that team is because, he led the league in shorthanded goals last year. And he hasn't been he was recently taken off the penalty kill by John Tortorella just to try to get him going. But, I mean, he's a hockey player. What else can you say? Like, he's a guy that is not as afraid to get his nose dirty. He's got a lethal shot. He's got a crazy engine. His competition is off the charts. I mean, he's a guy that is, for me, is fun to watch, right? I mean, he's the one that is right now putting butts in the seats in terms of the home fans. So, nationally, I don't know. We'll see if anybody scores a big goal in that tournament, they're obviously going to be on the map. But he's a guy that, again, him and Travis Sanheim is another one too. That he was great to start the season. Tailed off a little bit after that announcement. Was great on Saturday against the Ducks. So these two guys, I think they earned their way on that team legitimately.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin,
We'll let you go. We know you have got to get over to here towards Speak here in the next little bit. But we'll definitely keep in touch with you. We appreciate you jumping on with us this morning.
Sure thing, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. I just sneaked that one in about Konecny because I was arguing it all weekend with my buddy JP. So appreciate him taking the extra 5 minutes to chat with us. But awesome hearing about the Flyers. We haven't really talked Flyers much this year. And Colby, you said they're like that second wild card spot to me, maybe even both wild card spots, could be anybody. Like I'm not sitting here saying, the Rangers are going to get it. I don't know if Columbus is going to hold on to it or if Ottawa is going to run away with it. Like, this wild card position in the East right now is fully up for grabs. And I wouldn't be confident saying one team or two teams are going to run away with it and take it.
Yeah. I mean, I know you feel like the Bruins are cooked and
I didn't say cooked. I just think I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs.
No, you've used the word cooked. You've definitely used that word.
I don't know if I have with Boston. I don't know if I have.
I think you have, but that's all right. We can agree to disagree. That's fair. But look, I don't think the Flyers are getting into the playoffs this year, and I continue to kind of wonder, like, you keep having these seasons that are just they're not bad enough, right? They're like, and they never get themselves into the lottery, and you're not really giving yourself a chance of getting that type of player. I saw Jeremiah in the chat saying the Flyers could really use a guy like, Schaefer, the defenseman from World Junior. Was it?
Well, they ain't getting him,
Schaefer, right? No, You're not going to get him because he's going to go 1, 2, or 3 probably. I don't know what the injury does to him, but I agree. Like he's a stud. And then the other thing that I saw earlier in the chat that I did want to address is, I think it was Neil. You were listing off some teams, and I was a little confused. I didn't know if you were saying they were big defensive groups or small defensive groups, but like you said, I saw Tampa as one of the teams that you brought up, and like you think about Hedman and Sergachev and Chernak, and I mean, like
Sergachev isn't there anymore, pal.
What'd you say?
Sergachev isn't in Tampa anymore.
He was when they won the Stanley Cup, though, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about teams that were built. Big teams on the back end. Okay, so go sit in the corner. And then I saw a couple of other teams like Vegas, man. They had a big group of guys who could really skate. So I do think that you do need those big defensemen. And that's why Ristolainen, I think, is going to have some real value at the trade deadline. I really do. And I know Frank has been putting out his trade targets boards, and he's starting to really plug those articles, and obviously trade deadline coming up here. But, at the end of the day, I think that it'll be interesting to see like where the Flyers go and what they do, because like, again, I really want to see the Flyers get back to their days of where the Wells Fargo Center is unbelievable. And this weekend was a good sort of testament to what it looked like when they were making the playoffs and when they were super competitive. But and I'm rooting for Danny Briere. I mean, there's a personal relationship there, but it's hard for me to see the vision. It really is. It is hard for me to see the vision. So the last thing I do want to say, Johnny, I remember your Calder pick in the beginning of the year. I just was wondering if you wanted to revise that at all, because I think your Calder pick has 7 goals this year, I think.
Yeah. I thought Cutter was going to score 30 as a rookie. And listen, we give a lot of takes. We give a lot of picks on predictions and whatnot going into a season, and one that I was wrong about, but I'm not going to like sit here and say.
I mean, I do think this is 2 years in a row where your Calder pick has.
Yeah, it's been rough. Calder picks are rough. I will admit that.
Who did you pick the year before?
Devin Levi last year, and I think he played 30 games in the NHL maybe last year, and Cutter Gauthier this year. Although Cutter had 2 goals last night, overtime winner against Carolina last night, and I thought.
I mean, listen, great overtime, like great to get an overtime winner, but like, what was the goaltender doing there? Boy, was he out of position.
Yeah.
That was
Ducks had no business winning that game last night.
So I did text Frank, and he did say that the Wells Fargo Center is coming down, and they're building a new stadium for both teams that they're 50-50 partners on. When this news got out yesterday, and like I think I saw it on like Crossing Broad amongst other places, the way I understood it was that the Sixers were getting their own building, because that's all they've ever wanted is their own building. They're sick of being a tenant in Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center, which is owned by Comcast, which owns the Flyers. So there was this whole thing going on where they were going to put a new Sixers stadium in Chinatown, in Market East in Philadelphia. And so that's how I understood it yesterday. But Frank is saying, no, the new stadium is replacing Wells Fargo. I thought they were adding a 4th stadium down there, but it's interesting because Wells Fargo just spent a ton of money, like $400 million on upgrades for the players, for the fans, and then the outer part of the building. So, the big power players must have swung their bats a little bit heavy, and it looks like there's a new stadium coming to South Philadelphia.
But they didn't say a timeline of when, right? I don't see a year anywhere.
They're going to announce something today. So okay. I think they'll probably, but there's a whole, like, I don't want to call it a revitalization project in South Philadelphia, but they want to put hotels. They've got the whole Navy Yard, which is really underutilized. And, they want to do shopping down there. They want to do more food, more bars, more restaurants. Like right now you go down to the Stadium District in Philadelphia and you've got the stadiums, and then you've got
Xfinity Live, it's called, right?
Xfinity Live, which is like this little mini version.
It's really cool.
Stadiums. It's cool. And they have like a bunch of like 3 or 4 bars within it, and you can get like a cheesesteak, and like, they get the screens everywhere. But it's not enough to house all these people when, sometimes on a Sunday there's an Eagles game and a Flyers
game. 2 games.
Yeah. So it's crazy. So
I do love that. Like that's part of my, favorite sports cities are those ones that have the stadiums like in the same parking lot. And there aren't many like it. I think Baltimore is another one, even though there's no hockey team in Baltimore, but like Camden Yards and I'm blanking on where the Ravens play. Like I think they share a parking lot. Cities like that, I think it's so cool where all their stadiums are in one little section of the city. I find that awesome. I wish there were more cities like that. I see you're catching up on the chat right now. Who do you want to answer?
Nothing. I'm looking at some of the different of the different things in the chat, and I'm not. So We'll see what happens. Like last year I thought the Flyers were a playoff team, and then Tortorella messed with Couturier, and it felt like everything went downhill, right? So I don't see it happening this year. Like I don't.
I mean, I look at the wild card, and like, to me, none of these teams look like playoff teams. It's just who's going to bottom out and which teams will be able to last. But like, even Boston, Columbus, Ottawa, Detroit obviously has been hot now. Montreal, like all 10 of those teams, you're
just waiting for them to fall off.
Yeah, none of them like the 6 teams that are in the divisional spots right now in the East. Those are playoff teams. Those teams look good. They're playing good hockey. The rest, so inconsistent, and it's just which teams are gonna find a way to sneak in. I'm not confident in any of those 10 teams to take over those 2 spots.
But even you look at the Eastern standings, and as I am right now, like the Leafs are 6-4 in their last 10. The Panthers 5-4-1 in their last 10. Tampa 5-4-1 in their last 10. Washington 5-2-3, like a little bit better. Devils 5-4-1. Carolina 5-3-2. Like nobody. The Bruins 3-6-1. But then you get down. Right now, you're in wild card 2. Columbus 7-2-1. Ottawa, they're sliding 4-5-1. But Detroit 7-3-0. Montreal 7-2-1. So, basically everybody other than 2 or 3 teams that are outside the playoffs. Oh, it's like there goes my power. Just came back on. So if you hear things beeping, it's because the systems in my house are rebooting. But everybody in the East is just playing really average hockey right now. Like no team is just playing consistent and playing well and beating the teams that they should, and beating or beating good teams and beating the bad teams. It's just win one, lose one, win one, lose one. And that's kind of the East right now.
Also, I want to address 2 comments in the chat. Alex in Kingston said that means for the first time ever, winning the division in the East is actually worth something. Although last year I thought it was worth something too, because Washington didn't really belong in the playoffs last year either. Washington was not a very good team last year. The Rangers swept them. And honestly, I think any team that would have played Washington in the first round probably would have won that series in 5 games. They weren't very good last year. The other one, going back to the Devin Levi comment, this was Tommy T. I can't get over the fact that Johnny picked Levi over Bedard simply from the obvious handicapping angle that all media and voters were oogling over him. I'm not going to sit here and pick Connor Bedard and pick Macklin Celebrini and just pick number 1 overall picks to be the Calder Trophy.
But why? If you think that they're the best player, why?
There's no fun in that. There's no fun in that. That's the obvious. I want to have conversations when I make these picks. I don't just want to, throw the number 1 overall pick on the board and say, this is my Calder pick because he's the best player coming from the draft and he's going to get all the opportunity. I thought Devin Levi was going to have a great year last year. And I thought that was an off the board pick. And I thought he was going to get Buffalo back into the playoffs. I really believed in Devin Levi. He had 2 great years in college at Northeastern. And I thought he was going to come in and be a rookie goaltender that took over that we haven't really seen in a long time. And I was wrong. I'm fine with that. But there was no handicapping angle to it. It's not about betting. I just don't want to pick the number 1 overall pick to win Rookie of the Year every year. There's no fun in that. It's like saying Connor McDavid is going to win MVP every year. That's the obvious choice, but it's not always going to happen. Am I wrong?
I don't know, man. I think that I think you look at who the best player is and how you expect them to transition, and thinking a goaltender was going to be able to pull that off, coming right out of college, I think was just wishful thinking, because you kind of
and I prefaced it that way. And it was before UPL signed like his extension. I thought Levi was going to be the goalie of the future last year for Buffalo.
Yeah. Well, now you've been calling for him to get traded.
I've never said that. I've never been calling for him to get traded. I've said now that they have UPL signed for like 4 years, you may as well look into doing it.
I'm going to make Vic pull the tapes after the show.
Vic pull the tapes.
I've never said Buffalo. You're in a little bit of a delusional state right now about
I might be.
So look, all right. So
I'm running on like 1 hour of sleep.
Let's prime this up a little bit. So, Ken Daniels is working on the technology aspect of all right, he's here. So go ahead, Johnny. Let's read him in. Let's talk to him. It'll be great to talk to him about the Detroit Red Wings. I'm going to go for 2 seconds and you hear my alarm right now. So I'm going to mute myself and turn my alarm off. Because like I said, when we got the power back, all the systems in my house are freaking out. So I'll be back in about 5-10 seconds. You do your thing here and bring Ken in.
There's no read, so we're just going to bring Ken Daniels in, the legendary voice of the Detroit Red Wings. It's an honor to have you on here, first of all. It's our first time ever meeting. How much fun is Detroit right now? 7 games in a row, Todd McClellan takes over, and all of a sudden it's a brand new hockey team.
A hell of a lot more fun than trying to get an in to join you guys. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
Anyway.
we appreciate you working with us. I heard it was a hard time. You had to download the app and everything.
Listen, I was technically on at 9:33. You said 9:30, so 3 minutes of technology. That's not bad. With Mickey Redmond, you would have been tomorrow. So I'm well ahead of him. It's been fun, obviously. Excuse me. You do expect a coach bump, and this was more than a bump. This was a tackle in terms of Lions terms. I mean, this is unbelievable. So it's nice. It brought us back to playing meaningful games. March and April of last year, even though some were bad losses in there, which ultimately cost them in the end. But I know there's been a coach bump, and I know the Red Wings are playing well when all of a sudden my phone goes off like you guys, because I don't remember anyone getting in touch with me October, November, December. Nobody gave a crap. And then we come 2025 and all of a sudden, Ken, can you come on? It's the same thing that happened. No one cared about us until February of last year. And then you have the run. So nice to be wanted and nice to witness the hockey that we're seeing.
Well, Ken, first off, I could tell you this. Maybe we haven't asked you to come on the show before, but we have carried your calls on this show before. Yeah. That I can tell you. We have made sure it was your call as well. There was a couple last year, couple of
Lucas Raymond 2 goals.
We were like, we need to carry the sound for that call on this show, because one of the best parts of ESPN Plus is the fact that you can choose who you want to listen to. And I'll tell you, like, I've said this when you haven't been on the show, and so I have no problem saying it now. Some amazing, iconic, energetic calls that are the types of calls you hear them the next day and you feel like you were in the building. So we do appreciate what you do and what you bring to this game, and Detroit's on the forefront now, so it's even better.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Those words are much appreciated, believe me, because Mickey and I spent, I think, the first 2 minutes of the second period last night, because if I can digress here for a moment, we had a clip from the podcast, the conversation line that the Red Wings do, that I'm a part of quite often, with Patrick Kane, on how he got his nickname Showtime. So he told the story, and we showed Minnesota Fats, because he played pool in his garage with his dad, who called himself Showtime, and Minnesota Fats was a pool player, and Patrick in the playoffs against Minnesota with Chicago scored a goal, and after the goal he decided to take his dad's nickname Showtime, and then he called himself Showtime. And he said Brian Engblom was between the benches, and he went by and he said to Brian, said to him, "Did you call yourself Showtime?" He said, "Yes, I did." So that's how it came out. So we told that story, and then that led into Mickey talking about Jackie Gleason, who talked about Dan Kelly. And Dan Kelly's the legendary announcer who I literally dreamed my job. I'd put the transistor radio under my pillow at the age of 8 and find KMOX on the radio dial, St. Louis, and found the dulcet tones of Dan Kelly, who I still think to this day is the greatest announcer ever. And if you listen to the Canada Cup 1987 and those 3 games, Canada and Russia, in 6-5, 6-5, 6-5, that's the best hockey you'll ever hear called. And we told people that on the air. So that was a long story all about that and iconic calls and turning around to Dan Kelly. So we appreciate it. And he was good friends with Mickey. Mickey loved Dan, and Dan loved being called Jackie Gleason, all tied into Showtime and Patrick Kane. Long story, but that's why I appreciate what you said, because we appreciate those who we enjoy listening to. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, your Patrick Kane call too last year in Chicago, I think it was the most
so good,
born to be moment ever, right? Like most people would have saw that coming. I think if you could write a script, and a Patrick Kane overtime goal, obviously in his return, but I'm not going to sit here and ask you like what's been your favorite call, but I have
that would be it. That would be it, only because, well, there was one where Steve Yzerman scored late, I think, in 99-02 in the season opener. He scored like 1.2 seconds left, and just the way it happened. But that was because my daughter and her fiance were standing right next to me in the booth in Chicago. Yeah, and she's a nurse in Chicago. So to me, that was pretty cool. And Patrick and I had spoken about that in the morning. And I said, you have to do laps here because the fans love you. When they introduce you, you're not standing at the bench and just waving. He said, you think? I said, yeah, I'd go all the way around the rink. Now, he didn't. He only went up to center ice, but obviously had a couple of curtain calls that night when he was introduced in game, and then later for obvious reasons. But so that day was special because of that. My daughter being there with me.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah.
I knew how much, like, I knew he was loved in Chicago, and I played with him at the national team, and so I know him a little bit. We went to high school together there, Ken. But then when I worked in Chicago, even though the team was what the team was, I was like, wow, this is even, I thought they loved him in Chicago, and then I got there and it was like, no, they don't love him. They worship him. Yeah. And he is a god in that town. And it was incredible to see. And look, I'm pumped to see what he's doing on the ice now. And I'm pumped to see this run that he's on offensively. So I'm curious from your standpoint, because you're with the team every day, you're at practice, you're on the road. The power play has really gone north since, the coaching change and the production has just been consistent. What have you noticed just that looks different, or is it just the new coach bump when it comes to the power play in particular?
Well, certainly when you lost Jake Wallman, you lost Shane Gostisbehere, you'd think it would falter, and yet you had so much talent up front. And even if they switch sides and Kane into Brinkett, it's just different looks, and Larkin in the bumper, and they tried different things in front. I think Compher, and you got Rasmussen on the second unit in front. Tarasenko hasn't really hit yet. But even to have Gustafsson now start to come alive, boy, it's like a new player. Kane said to me when he came to Detroit, when he was in Chicago, he felt that Eric Gustafsson was the best up top that he'd ever worked with. I was a bit surprised to hear that. And boy, I'm thinking, Kaner, what were you looking at? Because you didn't see that early in the season. Now, all of a sudden, it's a new Gustafsson. There's a lot of new players. I think it's just the energy. And when Todd McLellan came to the first practice that he had, just play effing hockey, which is taken off here and loud enough that all the media could hear it. And I think the guys realize that. Yes, there's structure to Todd McLellan's game. There's structure on the power play, but it's still the same guy running it. It's still Alex Tanguay. And the power play wasn't bad beforehand. It's just taken off now. And I think all that just comes from free spirit. Just play effing hockey and don't worry about it. Okay, that's office. Let's just go now. Is this going to end at some time? Sure it is. It's going to end. It's not going to last forever. That's the nature of hockey. They could easily lose 7 straight at some point. That's what happened last year with the up and down. But I think in terms of the power play, the talent's there, and they're just letting their talent play.
Well, Eric Gustafsson's so interesting too, because last year when I'm a New Yorker, so I'm, always around the Rangers.
You witnessed that when Adam Fox went. I had heard
exactly
that when
what I was going to say.
Went down, he wasn't bad, was he? Did he take over for business? Okay. Yeah.
No, he was excellent. He kept the power play going. He was unbelievable.
Right. Yeah.
That was his best stretch of hockey last year when Adam Fox went down. So I thought, Gustafsson being there this year made perfect sense, right, to run that first power play. And I thought he would click right away. Obviously, it took a little bit more time than people anticipated. But last year, I thought Gustafsson was unreal. And then when Fox came back, his game took a little bit of a dive just because he wasn't getting the same amount of reps, the same amount of ice time, and that's obviously pretty common amongst these guys.
Yeah, and he'd been a healthy scratch here too. And again, that's the different coach. Coaches have confidence in some and not in others, so they didn't. Gustafsson with a healthy scratch. Justin Hall was a healthy scratch. What do you do about Albert Johansson? How do you get him in the lineup? It had been Edmondson with Seider and then Sherratt and Petrie. Now, Petrie goes out with injury. One man's injury is another man's opportunity. It's Albert Johansson. Now Hall can stay in. Now he's Gustafsson. It's a good pair. You got Edmondson, who's playing beyond his years, certainly. And, well, he's a rookie, but he isn't technically. But anyway, second season, call it what you will, not eligible for a Calder. But then, and you can put him on a second pairing with a kid like Albert Johansson, they don't miss a beat. So I think Hall now and Gustafsson, and I just believe in their heart of hearts, hey, we're getting playing time now. We don't have to worry about being a healthy scratch now. What happens when Jeff Petrie comes back from injury, who's on IR? That's a different story. But still, I think these two deserve, and if it keeps going, they're going to stay in, and they won't worry about the other.
Ken, you've been around the NHL for a long time,
Too long.
and people, well, you still got plenty of gas left in the tank from what it sounds like on TV. But do you think, labels in the NHL have always been really prevalent? Like, you get labeled something and it's really hard to shake that label. Todd McLellan has been labeled as the structure guy, the 1-3-1 guy. Like, you've got the rebuild coaches, you've got the defensive 1-3-1 coaches. From what you've seen so far with McLellan and the way the team has responded to him, do you think his label is fair? Do you think the 1-3-1 label guy is fair? Do you think he's all about structure is fair? Because some of the things that you're saying, I don't want to say they don't line up with that, but he's saying just go play hockey, just go make reads. It's a little different than maybe we heard about his time that he spent, most recently in LA.
Well, you mentioned reads. I think it's read the room. Read the room. He felt the spirit wasn't there. He read the room. And I think as a head coach, you have to do that. And the guys were down and he just had to let them be. Is there structure to his game? Absolutely. And with his experience, that comes, guys got to be accountable because they know. And in fairness to Derek Lalonde, who was his first head coaching job in the NHL level, he'd been in Iowa and been assistant with John Cooper. I mean, you have to be totally ignorant not to learn from John Cooper. So a lot of things he brought in were fine. Did the voice need to be different? Did the older guys need to hear something different? Did they maybe need to be pushed a little bit harder? Probably. I think Todd McCullough had used the 1-3-1, but I believe when Todd left Los Angeles, it was more Jim Hiller with the 1-3-1, and I think the guys hated it. But it was successful. Even here, knew the penalty kill had to be changed, so Bob Bugner was out. And I love Bob Bugner. Bob Bugner was out, though, and in comes Trent Yanni, who's been tied at the hip since they played junior together. Trent, I think a couple of years older than Todd, but they played junior in Saskatoon together, and they've been gone through the years. So now they switch from a trap down low and forcing everything to one side on the penalty kill, and they come to the diamond. And although it hasn't been perfect, you can see it's better. The goaltending, a big part of the penalty kill. Cam Talbot has the worst shorthanded save percentage in the National Hockey League. So that's got to improve. That's a big part of it. But you can even see the penalty kill in the diamond form that they are. And I'm thinking, why the heck didn't they try this earlier? And I said to Todd, did you use this in LA? He said, not a lot. We did at times. Not a lot of teams use the diamond, but we're going to try it here. So again, it's just adapting. It's trying new things. And I think with that, it brings the enthusiasm in the players in practice, and the practices are run quicker. And all of a sudden they're learning something new. So they're all engaged and they're just going to play effing hockey. So again, that's what they talk about, a coach bump. How long does this bump last? We'll see. I will say this. So the Red Wings have won 7 straight games, right? The longest streak since 2012. I believe. They got San Jose in here tomorrow night. The San Jose Sharks came in to the Red Wings last season. Detroit was up 4-0. Oh, yeah. God. The Red Wings were up 4-0. San Jose tied it and won it in overtime. 1 point. The Red Wings lost the playoffs by 1 point. And at the end of the year, I asked Derek about that. Derek Lalonde, and I said, does one game stick out? He says, no, not really. I don't break them down like that. I said, well, hell, that game sticks out to me. There's your point when you blow a 4-0 lead to the worst team in the National Hockey League. So you've got San Jose coming in here on Tuesday. Now, then it gets tougher. You go to Florida on Thursday, which if you could ever beat the Panthers, that would be 9. And then 10 is the franchise record for this team in consecutive wins. When you go into Tampa Bay on Saturday night, up against the Detroit Lions in Washington, in the same time, no one will ever witness it, even if they get it.
So much for taking it one game at a time, huh, Ken?
I know. I'm just looking ahead because I'm thinking, could they change the Tampa and Red Wing game to earlier in the day? Because in fairness,
just for the win streak.
Yeah, no, not just for the win streak, just for the sake of watching us.
No, yeah, that's what I mean.
I'd be watching the Lions. No, not about the win streak. I'm not getting that far ahead. Believe me, one game at a time. However, after San Jose last season, let's get past the Sharks. But no, I'm thinking for 10 games in what could be, or even if it isn't, you're up against the Lions. This, you know, you call it hockey town, but this is football town. This is the Lions.
Weren't they cheering Jared Goff's name at Red Wings games last year?
They chanted every game this year. Yeah. I'm of two minds on that one. I get it. I've spoke to some of the guys. Do they love it? No, they understand it. But it happened, though, when derisively, in my opinion, it could feel that way when the Red Wings were going poorly. I get it. It's the Detroit town. You're excited about Jared Goff. Totally understand that. Man, if the Red Wings were on a 15-game winning streak and the Lions were doing poorly and you were chanting Dill and Larkin at a Lions game, would it be taken derisively or would it be taken, hey, we love the Red Wings?
Yeah.
I'm 50-50. I'm down the road, but I can see how there's 2 points of view on that one. So yes, they're chanting Jared Goff at every Red Wing game, depending how many beers certain individuals had to start it. It'll happen every game. It's fun. They're into the Lions. I'm into the Lions. Go Lions.
Yeah.
I was watching the game last night. We have our foundation breakfast tomorrow morning for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. By the way, jamiedanielsfoundation.org if you'd like to bid on some items from anywhere in the United States or Canada or around the world, wherever you're being viewed. You can go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org. There are great silent auction items there, including Sidney Crosby's game used signed stick,
Wow.
many others, and Larkin jersey, Jack Hughes jersey for people in New Jersey. Anyway, our event is tomorrow morning, and Mike Tirico is hosting it. So I've gone out of hockey to go to baseball, rounding the bases with Mike Tirico and Jason Benetti and Dan Dickerson of the Tigers, Dan Schulman of the Blue Jays, Len Casper of the White Sox.
Wow.
And can't he speak to an historical losing season? We can't wait for that. And for Jason Benetti to do his impressions of Dan Schulman and for Len Casper. So Mike Tirico, gracious enough to host it, called the game in Tampa last night. He's flying in today. He'll be here tomorrow morning to host it. And we hope, again, to raise a lot of money. And anyone out there can help at jamiedanielsfoundation.org and bid on the silent auction. We'll get the items to you. That's it on that. Carry on. Thanks.
Well, hold on, Vic, make sure you put that in the chat for everybody. So they can just click the link right in our chat. We have a live chat function on this show, which
Beautiful.
is, it's actually the best part of our show because they inform so much of the direction of our show every morning because their opinions and their questions and whatnot. So yeah, let's make sure that we get that in the chat and we'll make sure we get that out over our social media channels. Go ahead, Johnny. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I had somewhat of an uncomfortable question. I don't know if it's an uncomfortable question for me to ask, but maybe for you to answer. And it's from one of my best friends who's a big Detroit Red Wings fan, excuse me. And I know that Mike Modano was going on Spittin' Chicklets this week, and I'm not sure if they covered it or not, but curious what it was like for you when, Babcock didn't give him that 1500th game. And I don't know if that's something you can talk on.
No, I can. Let's be clear about one thing on here.
Yeah.
And I'm upset that Mike ended up at 1499, and I know his dad, Mike, and I love the family. When Mike Babcock scratched him, do I know that he knew if this game would matter then? But I remember at the time, Pavel Datsyuk was injured. Chris Draper was injured. Did Chris Draper, let's be fair to Chris, love Drapes. But if you had one coming back in and someone had to be scratched, Mike Modano was not scratched at game 1499 in the end of the season. Mike Modano was scratched some 2.5 to 3 weeks earlier. That's the fact, Jack. You really have to look at the schedule at the time. Now, did Mike Babcock know at that time, if he doesn't play tonight, it's going to cost him in the end, even if he plays every game? I don't know that. As the way it worked out, he wound up at 1499. But the scratch happened was not, game 82, 1499. Let's not. It was 2 weeks earlier, and we had guys coming off the injured list because I did this story about somewhere 5 or 6 years ago. That's the best of my recollection when you ask me off the cuff like that. That's what I know happened, but I don't know if Mike knew, Babcock, that we would screw Modano in the end. That I don't know. I wasn't in the coach's office, and if anybody else at the time, whether it was Paul McLean, I don't know, or the great late Beast, if he was in the room, and Brad McCrimmon and knew of the time, or even who was there at the time. We've gone through not a lot of head coaches since the Ilitch family owned the team. This is the second in-season firing ever.
Crazy.
First was
Jeff Merrick's favorite stat.
Harry Neal, Brad Park. That was the first in 85, 86. This is the second one. So I don't know to that end. But anyway, there's the best I know of that. And I'm sorry that he got stuck on 1499. It's stuck in his craw, I'm sure, and I don't blame him.
It's almost kind of cool, though.
Who has? Maybe. I think he'd rather the 1500.
It's like the movie Mr. 3000. He gets 2,999 hits or something like that, and he makes something of that. You seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's like, hey, it's like if Ovechkin keeps going, and it could very well happen. No, maybe not very well happen. But can you imagine if there weren't the lockouts that Ovechkin had? We'd be talking about 1,000 goals. Can you imagine him being stuck on 999? You wouldn't want that. Seriously, without the lockouts he had in 05, that first year, I believe. Right? Would have been. And then in 12-13 and the extra games there, you have another 150 games. And we're not even talking about suspensions for Ovechkin when he slept in, the alarm clock didn't go, the All-Star game. We're not even talking about that stuff.
But to that sense,
let me ask you.
Let me get my thought out, Colby. come on. To that sense, too. Well, the other side of the argument is that Gretzky's games ended in ties. There weren't 3-on-3 overtime. There are a little bit of devil's advocate to that argument as well.
For sure. Yeah, very true. Yeah, good point.
So let me ask you my last question here, Ken, and this is more about you than it is the Detroit Red Wings. You've been doing this a long time. You've been with this team. You've seen Hall of Famers and Stanley Cups and all the way through, and then you get into this period of time with the Red Wings where they're they're not a playoff team and they're in this rebuild, and we hear about the Yzer plan. For you, right? For when you come to the rink every day at this point of your career, what is it that gets you excited? Because you mentioned you got San Jose coming to town, right? So you're going to get to do a game for the newest number 1 overall pick, and Macklin Celebrini, and he's exciting, and Ovechkin's on his chase, and Patrick Kane comes to your team at the end of his career. So you have all these other ancillary things around you, and I'm just curious, like, what is it that still gets you really excited when you're like, oh, I'm really excited for this one? Because you've done, I mean, do you know your exact game count? I'm curious. Do you know that number?
I do know the number, but not with Hockey Night always standing. I mean, with Hockey Night in Canada and Maple Leafs Radio from the early 90s, somewhere in there I have to be approaching within a couple hundred of 3,000. But with the Red Wings regular season, it'll be another season before I get to 2,000, just regular season. I'm over that, include playoffs and preseason, et cetera, and games I've done for NBC. I just did one this season for Amazon. Speaking of Macklin Celebrini, oh my God, the first time I saw him with Detroit, I said, this kid is awesome. Macklin Celebrini is going to be one hell of a player. I love watching Macklin Celebrini, and smart on both ends of the ice, and the competitiveness. Love him. Going to the rink every day, I get to go to the rink every day. And I've always said to Mickey when he walks into the gondola, every time he walks in, it's like, Kitty boy, hey honey, I'm home. Because we've been married for 28 years now, along with Ben and Addie and Locker in Washington, the longest serving TV duo currently in the National Hockey League. So 28 years with Mickey, we're best friends. You can't say that about many in the National Hockey League, and the broadcast partners are best friends when many don't speak. I don't know about you two. You look like you're friends. So, to be able to have that relationship and to be with this team. And Ken Holland years ago said to me, I love you and we're very close. And I said, you love me because we're good friends. He said, no, I love you because of your passion. And to me, I always say when I go on speaking engagements, and I will tomorrow morning at our breakfast, I lived by the 3 Ps in my life. And now as I get older, they happen to come more frequently between midnight and 6 a.m. But that's another story, those 3 Ps. However, the 3 Ps I've always lived by are passion, perseverance, and preparation. And ever since I wanted to get into this business, I've always said there's no such thing as luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. If you're prepared for what you do in any game, and I heard Al Michaels on Richard Deitch's podcast, and it was fabulous the other day, and Al was talking about his career, and Richard said, are you nervous? He said, I'm only nervous if I'm not prepared. If you're prepared, you shouldn't be nervous. And that is true. So I get to prepare every game to come to the rink, and I may spend watching the night before the team that we're going to play in 3 hours in the afternoon. And my wife will say, are you going to work? I go, it's not work. I'm going to prepare for a game. Then I get into the game for free. And then I get to spend Mickey goes down for the third period. Then I get to spend a few hours with Mickey. And I get to spend time with our great FanDuel sports crew and John Keating, who's retiring after this year. I'll say, and our producer, Brian Henry, and we'll talk 3 times a day because he's got that same passion for the game. And our crew, I will say, in a local broadcast, and others have said to me, you guys are like network. And I believe that because we all try so hard. And Mickey's got the Hockey Night background, and I have the Hockey Night background. And I learned from John Shannon, the absolute best in the business. And you bring that every game, and the stories we tell, like I mentioned Showtime earlier, and our guys went through to find the footage of Minnesota Fats, found the game that he was speaking to, found the game from the podcast. We tie it all together and tell that story in 30 seconds. That's the excitement of the day when we're on a call in the morning. How can we excite the people? We're in the emotional transportation business. How can we bring that? It's just not calling a number to a number to a number. That's not how I do the game. And I grew up listening to Doc Emmerich too, and Dan Kelly, as I mentioned. It's trying to weave the stories in so people will give a crap about Macklin Celebrini beyond just him playing. Talk about his father with the Golden State Warriors. Tell the story how he grew up in North End, played with Connor Bedard there. They knew each other. These are stories that the casual occasional fan may or may not know, but they may know that's cool. Oh, I want to watch that guy. Oh, I want to come when he comes into the building. That to me excites me. That's the passion. That's why I want to keep doing it. My son said to me, God bless him, he passed when he was 23 years old. And back in about 2015, he said, Dad, you suck at golf. You need a summer job. Unfortunately, he gave me one. And since I've got better at golf, but yeah, I get bored in the summertime. I could call hockey year round. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, well, it's so cool to hear you talk about that. You know, I've never, I've got to do games with Sam Rosen and Kenny Albert on Westwood
Love
One,
Sam. Love
and
Sam,
like
the best, the best.
Sam, like you, he loves to tell the story of the people, and I'm laughing as you're talking about some of those things because I also know what it's like to work with someone who won't speak to you during a broadcast because I did games in Chicago for a couple of years. So I know what it's like to have a partner that literally won't speak to you during the game before or after. So look, I don't, Johnny, I'll let you take the last question here, but I just want to say, Ken, you know, I got to meet you when I was working in Chicago. And I got to know your stuff more when I was working in Chicago, getting to watch the Red Wings more and getting to listen to you. And you were never anything but super friendly to me. And walking down that beautiful gondola that I know you had a hand in that building because it's the best view or one of the top 2 or 3 best places to call a game in the National Hockey League. But, you know, for everything you do for the game, for coming on our show today, I honestly couldn't be more appreciative and humbled to have you on here today. So for me, I really do appreciate that a lot. And again, even when the Red Wings aren't a good team, you still want to hear Ken Daniels call goals for the Detroit Red Wings. It's just a reality. I'm not saying it just because you're sitting here. And
we've said it a lot on this show. We have.
I say it all the time. So we're grateful what you do for the game of hockey.
Thank you, Colby. And when they suck again, you can feel free to call, okay?
All right.
I got spoiled over 25 years. We all did. Johnny, we're all spoiled. And now, you know, we're hopefully on a little bit of a roll and can sustain it.
Well, Ken, I have 2 more questions for you. One of them is very stupid, and the chat's probably been waiting for this one.
No such thing as a stupid question, but go ahead.
You might want to hear me ask first. One of them is, these are 2 questions, though, that I love to ask broadcasters. So bear with me, and I wouldn't be doing myself the service if I didn't ask you these questions. So every broadcaster is a human being. Everyone has this story. Was there one game ever during your career where something wasn't sitting right in the stomach and you had to hand the headset off to run to the bathroom? Do you have a game that stands out? These are my favorite ones to ask.
Oh, hell yeah. It was 2 years ago in Montreal, and you can ask Trevor Thompson about that one.
The Montreal hot dogs, I hear, the biggest problem. It's always Montreal.
No, it wasn't the Chanchot. For some reason, I was having dinner in the meal room, and I went, oh, it feels so good. And I went up to their gondola, which to me, ours was modeled after, because God bless Mickey Redmond. He measured, we dropped a tape measure from the gondola in Montreal down to see how high it was, and the offset from the boards should be less than 60 feet. And that's why ours is close, modeled after the Bell Center in Montreal. We didn't quite get it right, but it's pretty close. We're a little higher than we want to be, but okay. Anyway, I'm just not feeling great. And I go up to the booth now. I'm, the Technicolor yawn, not going very well. So I'm in the booth on the floor, and you can ask, if you're ever in Montreal, ask Gary, who's our stats guy in Montreal, been there for years, wonderful dude. And I'm on the floor, and I go, I don't know if I can do the game. Brian Henry, who's about 6'8", our producer that I love, comes up to the gondola, looks at me lying on the floor, curled up. Now, this is before the game starts. And he said, do I need to get you a paramedic? I said, no, but I need those stomach settling pills called Gravol, which you can get in Canada. So unfortunately, we sent Chris Osgood down to get them. Now, you got to know Chris Osgood, okay? Great goaltender, and I hope one day gets in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame of readiness, Chris Osgood will never enter. Osgood went downstairs, and if he sees a squirrel, gone. Anything can distract Ozzy. I don't know. It took him a while to get back up. I go, where the hell are you? And he's doing the color for me that night. Trevor Thompson came up, our host, and he comes out. He said, do I have to do play-by-play? And I said, you might, but let's see. If you ask Trevor to this day, he will say it was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. And I don't know how I did it. I really don't. Curled up on the floor in the gondola. The game began. I got out of the open. The studio handled the open, so I wouldn't have to be on camera just in case. Okay. That would be a viral, viral moment forever. And I got up, called the game, went to commercial, went and laid down. They gave me a 10 count. I got up, sat in the chair.
No
called
way.
the game. I was laid out on Redbird coming home. Our doctor was with me at the time, sick as a dog. We had a few days off, and the next day Trevor got sick. So it wasn't just me, it was going around. But that was the worst game ever. And somehow I got through the game. If you have to get through it, you'll get through it. You see, I'm coughing a little bit now. I missed the game a few nights ago, missed the game, the Ottawa game. On Tuesday was the first game I had ever missed in my 28 years of Red Wing hockey. My first game ever for Hockey Night in Canada that I was supposed to do. I sounded like Kermit the Frog. It was a Philadelphia-Montreal game, which Philadelphia went into the old Montreal Forum and beat them 7-4. It was a good game. I didn't do it. I was supposed to work with Dick Irvin that night. It was my first ever Hockey Night in Canada play-by-play, and John Shannon took me off the game 3 days early. That was a good thing. Other than that, the only game to sickness that I've ever missed in 28 years was this past Tuesday night, and Bob Kaiser from Grand Rapids filled in for me. The only other games I missed were COVID. Can I tell this story? How much time you guys have? Forever?
Go ahead.
We're never going to kick
live.
you out. So
Go ahead. You're live. You talk.
Let's make this all about me. How do you like me so far? I'm sorry that I'm telling all these. Sorry, that was my Canadianism coming out. Anyway, the other games that I missed, the only two, weren't due to sickness. It was during the COVID period. So we're back playing again. It was the All-Star break. And I came home and I said to my wife, boy, I got a bit of an itchy throat. She said, well, you should get a COVID test. I said, I'm not getting a COVID test. I got 10 days off for the All-Star break. This is great. So we go back the morning of the game. As I come into the building at Little Caesars, our trainer, Pete Van Zandt, says, Ken, you're going to have to go get tested for COVID because we're going on a trip and later to Minnesota and we've been gone for 10 days. And at the time, the restriction was 5 days out from COVID. So technically, didn't think about it. I went in, I'm up in the gondola, ready to call the game. 10 minutes before the game, Mary Brady, our producer, says, Ken, you have to leave the building. You have COVID. I went, what the? Are you serious? They booted me out of the building and I missed the next game in Minnesota. Technically, my COVID period had already lapsed, but I forgot that all I had to say to them was, guys, I think I had COVID 10 days ago. Right. But I tested positive for COVID. So I missed those two. But this is the first one legit to sickness because I got through the one in Montreal. 28 years. The first game I ever missed was last Tuesday. So knock wood, doesn't happen again. But that night in Montreal, I will never forget and got through it. And I don't know how. So Johnny, there's the answer to that one. So go ahead.
So not a stupid question then.
Okay. No, not stupid at all. No.
All right. I could smile about that one then for the rest of the day and not feel dumb. But Ken, thank you so much. And I speak for Colby and I and our chat too. Our chat is loving you right now. That you are welcome on here whenever you want, unless the Red Wings go 0-82, then we won't even.
I'll never hear from you. I'll never hear from you.
You won't hear from us. But we appreciate your time this morning, and I look forward to meeting you when you guys are in New York. It'd be awesome to meet you in person. So thank you so much for doing this.
Please come up and visit. Thanks.
I'll be up there.
All right.
Thanks, Ken.
Damn headphones. You got it, guys. See you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was awesome. Really cool to have Ken on. And we got to give snaps to Vic. Vic got Ken. So
yeah,
good stuff, Vic, on a Monday, no less, too.
And like I said, I just want to reiterate this. You meet Ken, and he is just a genuinely nice human being. I mean, he and they're not all like that. I say that all the time. What he said was really accurate. There are pairings in the NHL broadcasting world where they do not speak to each other. They do. I mean, and I know I made a joke about when I did games in Chicago, which there's truth to that because the guy didn't want to speak to me. But there are pairs that have worked together for years, and even pairs that were really good. Look at the Dallas, the not the current Dallas Stars booth, but the previous Dallas Stars booth, which was one of the best booths there was. They hated each other. Okay. And so it's really cool to see, it's really cool to see that. And, again, when you have a guy like Ken Daniels, you want the stories. Like, we want to hear about the Detroit Red Wings right now, but like, you want to hear these old stories with Ken Daniels, and especially as he gets into them, start to hear the broadcast voice a little bit. You start to hear the tone.
I think Ken would be a great summer guest, so we could really dive into his entire career. Obviously, when we have guests on these shows, we're doing these live, guys, so we want to keep everything a little bit up to date. But in the summer, we really get into players' careers for the most part,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, we
broadcaster
should.
careers.
We should
He'd be a
see if
great summer guy.
we could get Ken for a summer episode
Yeah.
and really just talk about him for an hour, because
Mhm.
as much as the Red Wings have won a bunch of games, personally, I'm more interested in I want to hear his background and all of the above. But again, you talk about meeting genuine good people in hockey. He's one of those genuine good people. If he ever says to you, "Let me know if I can help you out," I bet you he means it, right? Not everybody always says that. So, all right. So look, let's hit a couple of quick news notes before we get to Bet365, Johnny. I don't know if there's any one or two that you wanted to call out from this NHL news and notes section that we put together. Is there one bullet point here that you wanted to touch on real quick?
Honestly, it was the Bruin stuff with Pasternak and Marchand. Because listen, we've done a lot of calling out on this show of what's real and what's bullshit, and I just love what Brad Marchand did. I love that he addressed the media directly, came out and said that this is not true. I'm not familiar with the radio host that made the claim.
Yeah, that guy just says dumb shit and makes stuff up all the time. I mean,
I just like that players now, it seems like this year more than previous years, like we had a player reach out to us when he saw something that was false. Like players are starting to, I guess, take hold of what is real and what is not. And listen, we had Kevin on before and we were talking about what's media driven and what's not. And like the story in Philadelphia, he made clear, like, that's not a media driven thing. But this whole situation in Vancouver that everyone's talking about, like maybe we're creating more of a, and I know it's real, but maybe we're creating more of a story than it really is, and sometimes people like us and people in media and fans and everyone, you can create your own narrative and run with it, and it just picks up steam, and that's just how these things go. But not all of them have truth to it. And I just like when a player comes out and actually speaks to what is true and what is not, because listen, like we talk about these guys and their personal lives like we have any business doing so, which we really don't, about their personal lives, and I like when they take hold of that and put out what is actually happening. So I just love what Brad Marchand did. That's really all I wanted to say.
No, listen, it was garbage. I mean, that whole thing was total garbage. Merrimack with a huge upset over BC. I see that in the chat, Neil. That was a huge upset this weekend. We do try to always weave some college hockey into the show. And then, UConn 11 in the pairwise right now. I see you, Neil. I'm with you. Obviously, Johnny and I are doing games in the East, although I'm not doing any more games till the NCAA tournament. I'm sure Johnny has some UMass games here coming up at some
I have
point.
Princeton and Cornell on Friday, actually.
All right. At Princeton or at Cornell?
At Princeton.
Oh, so you'll be down in my neck of the woods today.
Yeah, but I'm not going to ask you to hang out because I know you won't answer me.
Yeah, definitely not. But it's good that you know that, though. I give you a lot of credit. Look, we'll save Ovi. We'll save Capo Caco. We'll save some of that stuff for later in the week. I see that kind of buzzing around a little bit. I'm just kind of going through the chat to see if there's anything else that we need to look. I
think Ovi.
Let's give the Winnipeg
20 goals.
Let's just give Winnipeg some love real quick. Another big time shutout by Hellebuck. He's kind of run away with the Vezina this year. Like I think he's just played at a different level than everybody else. But the test for him is going to be the playoffs. I think that even people in Winnipeg would say that. And then, yes, Ovi, just 20 years with 20 goals. The guy just continues to amaze. He's an ageless wonder. It's going to be really great. To see him break this record. Probably not this season, which I don't necessarily.
I think he is.
You think he's going to score 20 more this year?
1,000%.
Yeah. Okay.
At the pace he's going at, 1,000%.
Yeah. All right. Listen, I almost wonder if it's better to see if him do it next year so they have the summer to plan for it. But either way, it's going to be incredible. The other thing, Big Willie Styles, I'll just mention to you in the chat here real quick, because I know you've been saying you got to come to Minnesota to do a game. Like, we don't choose where we go, just so you guys know. Like, that's never our choice. Yeah. And ESPN used to have a deal with the Big Ten where they would do 4 regular season games a year. So for a couple of years, I actually always did do a game up at Mariucci. Like at least once a year, we would do a game at Mariucci, and then we'd usually do a Wisconsin-Minnesota game or something like that. We would usually get them a couple of times a year, but with Big Ten Network, ESPN doesn't actually have that deal anymore. So we don't do regular season Big Ten games. So probably not going to happen. If it did, it'd be awesome, but probably not going to happen. So other than that, Johnny, I don't know if we want to get to Bet365. I will say my computer is getting down to single digits, and I did get power back, but I'm not near my computer chargers down in my office. So let's hit Bet365 and then let's get ready for tomorrow's show.
Just one quick thing. IMPRSV or IMPRSV asked, is Ovechkin the first to do 20 and 20? Gordie Howe is the only other person that has done it. 22 seasons with 20 goals. So just wanted to address that quick. But tonight's bet of the night, we're going to stick with the Philadelphia Flyers, and they are home dogs tonight, taking on the Florida Panthers. And Spencer Knight should be starting in goal for Florida. Florida's playing again tomorrow in New Jersey, so I imagine they'll start Sergei Bobrovsky in Jersey tomorrow. So we're hoping that Philly can keep the momentum from their game on Saturday into tonight's game at home against Florida. The Panthers have been a bit streaky. They lost the game at home the other day against Boston, even though they probably deserved to win that game. What a crazy game that was, by the way. The final 4 minutes of that game, actually the final 8 minutes of that game between Boston and Florida was must-watch hockey. The Panthers were all over Jeremy Swayman, all over Boston, and they get that fluky one to tie it before Pastrnak gets that fluky one in overtime to win it. But tonight we're going Philadelphia money line, plus 140, and only 3 games tonight, so not a lot of hockey to watch.
Power rankings tomorrow after is that the
bring your mic closer
tomorrow?
Power rankings tomorrow?
Power rankings tomorrow?
Yeah, we can do power rankings tomorrow. It's been like 3 weeks since we've done it.
I know we really haven't got to it. So I think that's probably a good idea. So all right, look, if you haven't liked the episode, do us a favor, get us a like on the episode. We always tell you guys how important that is. We're going to continue to tell you how important that is. Hey, it's 2025, baby. Contract year for us. It's a contract year, right? Like, we need a new one in 2025. So we need all your help. You guys are not a huge part of it. You are the part
you
of
are.
It. Like, you are the part of it, right? So when you guys see Johnny out, you make sure he buys you whatever it is that, you see him at a bar, Johnny's buying. You see him at a restaurant, Johnny's picking up the tab. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. All right. I'm signing him up for all that, as you can see. So just make sure you give us a like on the show. Make sure you subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We're coming into prime trade season. So you're just going to see more and more. There's probably going to be random videos posted on the YouTube of breaking news, things that happen. I've seen you do it, Johnny. I've seen Frank do it. I'm sure Jeff will do it at some point. We've got DFO live at noon. We've got the sheet at 3 p.m. I was supposed to make my sheet debut last week, the day that Jeff filled in for me. I was sick. So hopefully I'm going to get the invite to come back at some point, although I could understand where I would be kind of on the not reliable list, I guess, right now is probably where I might be sitting there. But make sure you get involved in all the shows. Go ahead, Johnny. I can see you're dying to say something.
Well, I just didn't address it last week because I didn't understand like how severe it was, but the Los Angeles fires, it's something that I feel like we just have to address a little bit. I've had a couple of friends now lose their homes. And I can't say I know what it feels like to lose your entire town and where you grew up, but I obviously understand what it's like to lose a house in a fire. For those who don't know, my house burned down almost like 3 years ago in April. So, I really feel for everyone in Los Angeles that's going through this. It's heartbreaking to see. And obviously, again, I apologize for not addressing it last week. I just didn't understand how bad it really was. But I played this weekend in Vail with a bunch of buddies from LA, and we actually had to have 5 guys drop because of the fires. One of our teammates lost his house, so he wasn't able to come. It's horrible to see what's going on. Some of my best friends, the Rivera family, their childhood home burned down, and actually yesterday they went to like the ashes of their house and like had one last beer at their house. They cracked open a beer, basically standing on the ashes of their home. They tried to make it a little bit of a lighter, funny situation, but it's obviously something that's super sad. And I know there's been some games that have been canceled and whatnot. And as someone who kind of went through that personally, it sucks to see. And again, I'm not comparing my situation to what's going on in LA, but I know what it's like to lose basically everything in a fire. So it sucks. And again, really sorry to everybody in LA.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry to take over there, Colby, but
it's okay. You don't have to apologize for not addressing it. You don't have to be first. You just want to make sure you have your thoughts collected and you understand a situation before you address it. So you don't have to apologize to anybody, but well said. I'll echo the sentiments. I know a number of people that are really unfortunately tied up in this. And look, stuff you can replace, humans you can't. So just, gotta hope the situation gets worked out and it's unfortunately still ongoing. So with that note, I know it's a little bit of a sad note. We do appreciate you guys today. So great to get Ken Daniels on. Good job, Vic. Honestly, that was a phenomenal pull by you. So you got to give Vic props. Where it goes. It's great to have Kevin Kurz on and get his point of view. He's an interesting guy, Kevin, because he's local. He grew up here. Him and I are a number of years apart. Like, he's about 4 or 5 years older than me. So we never went to school together, but I actually went to school with his younger brother, who happened to be in my brother's grade, and played hockey with his younger brother. So I obviously have known him forever. And you do get a little bit of a different perspective for a guy like you. He's not quite as unprofessional as you are, but
no one's as unprofessional as me.
Right. Yeah. He did grow up a Flyers fan, and now he covers the Flyers. But again, he does it a little more even-handedly than you do, but the passion is still there. It's the good without the bad. Anyway.
Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, for me always. But anyways, we appreciate everybody today. Noon DFO Live. 3 o'clock the sheet. I know we'll see you guys in the chat on that show anytime I'm able to. I'm in the chat, especially when Johnny's in there or he's on the show. Then I really have to be in the chat. But we'll do our best to keep you guys updated on what's going on with all of those shows this week. I love the flow Jeff has gotten into. He's got Wyshansky on Tuesdays. He's got Berkey coming on Fridays, which I got to tell you, I love Brian Burke on that show because Brian Burke can say whatever he wants. Like, he's not beholden to anything. And I just love that. I love people that are at a point in their career where they'll say what's truly on their mind. And most people don't get to that till the end. They just don't. And Berkey's one of those guys. So we appreciate everybody today. Like the episode, subscribe to the channel. Other than that, hopefully we'll have Frank Saravalli on his new normal Tuesday slot tomorrow. Power rankings tomorrow. So get your power rankings ready. Get ready to defend them. I know you're not going to agree with me for sure. Probably not Johnny either. So get ready to defend them. Get your info together. Other than that, we appreciate everybody rolling with us, and we will see everybody back here 9 a.m. tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.